that, and we have one more question that we're going to be launching in this realm on the DJNTV chill room with the one and only Brian S. Red.
Hi.
It's
Hi.
been a while.
It has, John. I missed you.
And we used to talk and then all of a sudden life gets in the way, and next thing we don't write, we don't send cards, and
And you make me come in here with crazy people like twice a week.
crazy people.
Yeah. I have lunatic co-hosts. It's nice to have somebody sane for once.
Although you've got some wonderful folks off camera tonight. These
Yeah, I do.
Some of the most sane, mature, organized people.
Oh, everyone here is lovely. Yes, yes.
Exactly. Okay, good. That's a different thing. So tonight, our question and answer night, we just finished up with that, and I wanted to do this one. I was hoping either to do it tonight or tomorrow night, and it just worked out that Brian was going to be available tonight, so we're going to do it this night.
Yeah.
And Brian, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about, somebody had asked about that back in the day. How did you find gigs? How did you find your events? And I wanted to kind of take us back to when we were very first starting out. What did you do, or what were DJs doing in your area to find events? We're going to work from back then and kind of bring it up to things that have worked over the years and how they've come and gone.
Sure. Well, for me, it was a little different because I was working for other mobile companies and they just had the gigs. But once I started my own company, it was kind of weird because a lot of the people who I had worked with at the multi-app had started their own mobile companies too. And a lot of them had gone to the wedding shows and they are getting all of these leads. So they couldn't wait to kick work to me. So I just sat back and filled my calendar. I know that's like cheating, but I was able to like book my whole calendar just on reputation before I even did my first event.
Wow.
Yeah, I got lucky. I got real lucky. But yeah, the wedding shows ultimately is where those leads came from. But the reason I got them is because I was a solid referral and they felt good about sending people to me.
So really, you were really early in that. Networking was a big part of your early success.
Yeah, and the people I was networking with were the people who I had worked with, gone out on the road with, because at the multi-op back in the late 80s, early 90s, everybody went out in pairs. There was always like a key DJ and then an assistant. It's not that any one of us couldn't have done the event. It's just that the stuff was so damn heavy to carry, you had to have two people to do that.
Sure.
So that's how they sold it.
And
Hi, Jay.
Jay, well, I'll get you the question here in just a second here, and I'll get you going.
I told you he'd stumble in 5 minutes late.
You did mention that, and
I have no idea what's going on.
3 minutes late. That's okay. We'll get there. That your experience in that kind of actually reflected the early days of when we started the Minnesota Association of Professional DJs, from the standpoint that all of a sudden we had a lot of DJs who knew who myself, Bill Herman, others people were, because prior to that we were always hating on each other. Situation. And it was interesting is once we got to know each other and started finding out we kind of liked each other, that there were other DJs who were like, hey, I would trust this guy. This is the guy. Da, da, da. And the next thing you know, you're filling your calendar on these referrals and this networking.
Right.
Really, in my situation, I didn't experience that throughout our growth from the late 80s and through the 90s. It really wasn't until that end of the 90s when we started that I experienced that. So yeah, that for hitting it right out of the park right away like that.
Well, I had been a DJ for over 10 years when I started my own DJ company. And so, I mean, I was solid. They knew I was solid. And it's funny because to this day, I still do a lot of work that way, where I have a lot of friends who know that they can kick work to me and I'll handle it. In exchange, they know that I'm there for them as well. So I've got a real tight network of people that I really trust, have known for years. And I'm real fortunate that way. And I've developed those relationships and cultivated those relationships. Like Wavy Davy, I've known him for well over 30 years.
Yeah.
And I got a friend, Arj, who I've known for 10 years. Of course, I've known Big Ron for, ever since I've been doing YouTube. He throws me a lot of work. He gets a lot of work and he can't handle all that work. So I take a lot of it. And yeah, it's just groovy to network like that. When you have peers in your local area, real people, not just like, on social media, but people you actually know and have worked with who trust you and you trust them. And it's a love fest. It works out for everybody. It's nice that way.
Yeah, for sure. So Jay, what we were starting out with is one of the questions that was presented. We were gonna use it in an earlier show if we weren't going to use it with Brian to talk tonight, and it worked out that we could do this tonight. The question was referring to or looking back at how when we first started our DJ businesses, how did we drum up the events? What were we finding events? Because that's such, today so many are struggling with that of where to find events, and they're like, okay, let's look back. So when you were very first starting out, where were you finding success drumming up business?
I was really fortunate. I started the company after leaving another company for 7 years. So I'd been running the entertainment branch of a yacht company in San Diego. So I was already working with other DJ companies on weekends that I wasn't booked. So if I was off on a weekend, I would get a call a month out or 2 months out and be like, hey, are you booked this one Sunday? No. Hey, do you want to pick up this wedding for X amount of money? And this is in the late 90s, very early 2000s. It's the pre-Mark Farrell time. And that was kind of the beginning of wanting to go solo and start my own company was, wow, there is money to be made. But when I first left, I had already booked up through outside referrals and sources. I had a huge 2003, 2004 calendar. And it actually worked against me because when I moved from San Diego to where I live now in Temecula, I would go to wineries and be like, hey, I'm a new DJ in town. I'm from San Diego. I just won, People's Choice Bridal Insider Best DJ and all this stuff. And they're like, great, here's 5 dates. I'm like, oh, I'm booked. Oh,
and I remember that.
Well, yes. Yeah. And it really hurt in the beginning. And then I, like a lot of DJs now, I really had to start from zero. And what happened was I really went out of my way on any gigs I had to try to get an in. Do you have a set of DJs you refer? What do I need to get on your list? And a lot of that I proved by being early to every event. No drinking, no problems, no issues, no attitude. And I immediately got on 2 or 3 vendor lists that really helped me. One in particular was a hotel where I was their resident DJ for 13 years. So I did all their events, and it was really getting in with the initial wedding coordinators on properties. Because I think now it's much different. When I go to new venues now and I say, hey, do you have a list of DJs you refer? Yeah, I've got some guys. They're good. Or they'll say to you at the end of the night, wow, that was a great job. Like, our guys don't do these 3 things that you did. I'm like, oh, are you looking to add to your vendor list? No, because these guys are already on there and I know them and they're friends. And I'm like, oh, so you'd rather have a less quality product because you know them. I go, I'm not trying to take a job, but if I did a better job than someone, shouldn't I take the first shot at it? So it's, I was listening to Brian. I think a lot of it nowadays, it's really grassroots. You got to go around the block and find other DJ companies and say, we can work with each other or we can work against each other. And it even to
you see what I go through, John?
Yeah.
It's like this, man. He goes from one thing to the next and there's no respond.
About the end of the thing though, he's almost brought us up to today. So now we can go. I'm just waiting.
Almost there.
Yeah, he's almost getting there.
I'm sorry.
He's like at last week. I mean, he's that close today. So we're getting there.
He's got not to say.
I love you. Almost 20 years with Pioneer DJ. I must have something going.
You got something. You got a lot going for you.
I'm on this channel.
You're a new guy.
My lawyers.
Yeah.
Izzy from Dewey Cheatham and Howe has assured me my salary is extensively higher than yours. So
I want to add one thing real quick, if I could, please. I also remember when I started my DJ company, I was 22 years old, and I was doing a lot of nightclub work at the time, and I would get people from school calling me, people I wasn't like friends with, but I was the DJ in my high school. So, I might not have been the most popular kid in school, but I was definitely the one that was the DJ. There wasn't any other DJ. I was the guy for that. So I would get calls from people, hey, we're getting married. And I would say to them, well, I don't do that anymore. I'm doing clubs now. And then one day someone called me and said, well, you need to do my wedding. And I said, well, I don't do this anymore. He says, well, why not? I couldn't think of a good reason. And I said, I told my mom, because I was living at home at the time, I said, Mom, I that this guy wants me to do his wedding. I don't have any equipment. And she says, here's $2,000. Go buy equipment. And I did. And I was able to pay her off with security deposits before I did my first event.
Nice.
So that was cool. I owned the business free and clear, and I was working, but it was that cool. I was 22, almost 23 when I started, and there were like a lot of people getting married at the time. I mean, back then, that's when you got married.
Yeah.
So I got all of those people too, on top of my associates overflow stuff.
So you guys you had a little bit different start than I did when it came to this. Being in a very rural area, for one thing, that put up some different challenges, and I did not network with any other DJs in the area. It just wasn't a thing. It was more backstabbing than anything else.
That hasn't changed.
So in many ways, it hasn't. So early when we got started, we had a couple of we went to some neighborhood bars to basically get some events on the books. We had purchased gear for a different college friend that was going to hire us to do some things, and it fell through. So here we have gear, but no events on the books. So we went to some neighborhood bars and talked to them, the small town bars. Early on, what our marketing was printing out signs, the 8.5 by 14, so they were like longer than a traditional sheet of paper. We put them on neon color, and it was black ink that we did. There was nothing, no color beyond that. And they were basically our name, and then we had, because this is back in when CDs were first coming out, we had all on digital music on CD, and then we'd put names of some of the CDs that we had. Because the music at that time in this area with DJs, not everyone had most of the music.
That was a thing.
So it was a thing. And
a long time ago.
We literally had Todd Rundgren on our posters at one time.
We have I Saw the Light. Now what was neat. Does your DJ have that?
Now it's a thing.
So we have Bang on the Drum all day.
We put those signs in every little small town bar around here. When I'm talking small town, one town our very first event was in a town that has 45 people in it, and 2 bars, 45 people. The town that we live in, it's got 300 and some people in it, and we were doing these little types of venues here, and it worked out. As we started out, picked up our first wedding from those types of flyers and that type of marketing, and that, I bet that carried us 90, 91 into 92. So that 92 was this thing called the Yellow Pages. And that was big time, and because now all of a sudden we could go, and everyone who opened that we're looking for a wedding DJ, where would you go? Yellow Pages was the thing in our park.
That was not a cheap date.
Oh my gosh, we looked back at it at our peak in the late 90s when we were running 16 systems pretty much every weekend in the summer. We were spending like $12,000 on Yellow Page ads in rural Minnesota, which means we were taking out like 4-inch boxes and paying or whatever, and we were in every book that you could find out here.
I did it once. I got a damn 800 number, and you know what? Yep. I did better with networking than I did with that.
By far, I could definitely see where that would have been advantageous. We just didn't have, beyond some venues, we didn't have that, especially the other DJs. That was really until we started with the Map DJ.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me back up. My very first DJ friend that I had in this industry would have been Troy.
Okay.
Troy and I were at a bridal show in the probably mid 90s, somewhere in that the early to mid 90s, but maybe 93, 94.
Sure.
He was at a wedding show, but it was a bridal show at the time, and he was doing the sound for it on the other end. And of course, you look at the gear, and it's like that guy's gear sucks compared to my gear, and I got much better gear than he has. And it was one of those things. And then as he's playing the music and such, it's like, gosh, he's got a really good taste in music. I got to go over and compliment him on that. And we struck up a conversation and a friendship that's lasted for
Right. Yeah. Troy's a great sponsor of ours.
Yeah, and he's a great sponsor with DJ Event Planner. You guys links will be in the description. You guys can go check out their online event planning system there. But yeah, Troy's been just a staple of my life since then, as well as the industry. So he's a good guy. But yeah, that was my very first DJ friend.
Nice.
And it probably took until 10 years later before the second when we got into that Map DJ time frame, because it just didn't.
I'm thinking my oldest DJ friend who's still a DJ. I mean, I know people who were DJs and they dropped out. It's got to be Wavy Davy.
Sure.
Got to be. I mean, God, I've known that guy forever. So I think we met in '89.
Oh,
And I've known people who have DJ'd, I've met before him, but who are still DJs. Nah, that's way Dave. Gotta be. And it's cool to have those friendships that just
have been around there forever. Like,
yeah.
No.
How about you, Jay? Who's your oldest DJ pal? Me? Christian?
No, Kirk.
I know Kirk.
DJ Mac. Yeah, I hired him in 1998. I mean, I know some of the DJs I worked with before that, but as far as still like kind of in touch with, I mean, I met Christian in 2003, you in 08.
Yeah.
And there's still some of those people from the early 2000s. But I mean, I was genuinely so busy at the time that I was hiring the DJs. So it was a weird relationship. I was a DJ full time on the boats.
Right.
And I had to hire, 1,000 DJs a year for events. I didn't really, it was more that I could trust you.
Right.
And then I started getting friendly with DJs because I realized they would do things for me as far as, I could become a priority. So I would try to give them work in January and February when it was time. And that way, when I needed them in July and August, I became that priority. One thing that came to mind real quick about when you're trying to break things like this, I found, and it worked out in a weird way. I'd done a birthday party at a club in San Diego. And about 2 weeks later, I got a call from the booker of the club. And she's like, yeah, we have a corporate party coming in from 6 to 2 a.m. So it's 8 hours. So I'm going to need like 4 DJs. And I was wondering if you were available. I'm like, oh, I do 8-hour events. She's like, really? I'm like, yeah. She goes, because all my guys only play 2 or 3 hours in the club. So they don't have the music to play for 8 hours. Again, this is pre getting all your music kind of ripped up.
Right, yeah.
And I remember this was 2003. 2002, and she said, how much? And I said, you have all the gear. I just need to bring my music. Well, we have vinyl. I said, okay, I'll bring CDJs and a mixer. And I said, 175. She goes, oh, that's what my guys charge. I'm like, no, an hour. And she figured out for 8 hours. And she called me back and she's like, oh, I didn't realize it was that much money. I'm like, it's the client paying it. I'm sure they'll be okay. And she called me back 20 minutes later and she goes, yeah, you're good to go. So she ended up hiring me all the time for corporate because in her mind, a club DJ couldn't do 8 hours of background and disco and old.
Right.
So I think you have to decide, you were successful as a club DJ and a mobile DJ, Brian, but I've seen a lot of guys go heavy club and have a tough transition to mobile.
Oh, yeah.
So I think sometimes you have to make that decision early on. The money's in corporate and weddings. It's really not in clubs, not even today.
No.
So, if you want to do both, figure a way to do them without being labeled.
Sure.
'Cause I've had people say, oh, you're a wedding DJ, you can't do clubs, and vice versa. So, for new DJs, even in a small town, like John was saying, go to some place and say, hey, I'd love to DJ here on a Wednesday. I know we've got an audience for deep house or EDM or whatever, just to kind of get the exposure and a downtime, because that'll pay off in the summer.
Jay, when you were talking about your early experiences, that when you'd go to these venues and they would pull out their calendar and it's like, yeah, okay, great, let's book. The number of times that happened, we go to these little bars and, hey, can we put up our signs? Sure. Hey, how much do you charge? Da-da-da. And we'd like to let's you get your calendar with. Great. I bet that first 2 or 3 weeks that we were doing that, we had 10 bars that did this. And the first one, of course, goes through and they're like, yeah, we want this Friday or this Saturday or this. And they go through and they pick their 4 dates just because that's what it was. And then the next one, I'm sorry, that's already booked. And it was interesting is that if they couldn't get like all 5 dates that they wanted, they were not booking any dates whatsoever. Yeah. And it became such a problem for us, or we felt it was a problem, that really pushed us to going, well, it isn't, maybe, my partner and I, my buddy and I, that we started this together because we enjoyed music together. Maybe we should, have 2 shows going every weekend. So instead of making $50 with a pair of us, we could make $50 with, each of us could make $50.
I have 2 observations.
Yeah, that's the problem.
2 observations. First observation, John, you can really relate to this. There was a time when the DJ wasn't the equipment. The DJ was the music library. If you had that music library, you were in, which is why they were so interested in you. And you would post, so that's an old days thing. Music libraries weren't easily attainable on Amazon or promo only or whatever.
Wherever,
My second observation is that if I'm understanding this correctly, Jay and I were DJs before we started a DJ company, and you became a DJ when you started your DJ company. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's two sides of the coin there. You can either start your company and start being a DJ, or like what we did, which I don't think is very common anymore, where you are a DJ, then you start a DJ company. I think most people just get the equipment and to become a DJ.
The price of entry has changed so much.
Yeah.
I talked to Pulse today about that, and it's like, there are guys out doing gigs tonight with $249 controllers and a facade around it, and they're killing it. They're doing a good job. Everything's cool. That was impossible when I started. I mean, there's just that gear didn't exist, and you had to make that decision. Do I get, when I did the boats, we had 7 systems, and they were all not the cheapest I could get, but it was close because it was all about the ROI, and the gear wasn't moving. And, my first system was really expensive, and my boss was like, yeah, we can't support this. We could have, but, he wanted to cut corners. So it was the $150 4-channel mixers going on all the boats, and
it's all I use. I use the cheapest stuff in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And
not with my own company, but with the mobile companies I was also for.
Right. It was also different then. I mean, I put a CMX 100 Newmark mixer that I know I paid under $150 for, brand new, on a boat that played probably 4 days a week for 7 years.
Yeah.
That never went out of rotation. It never broke down, never had a problem, but then my first iPhone was really powerful compared to maybe my new iPhone. I think it was relative to the times.
Sure.
But getting gear, when I had CDJs at weddings in 2004, 5, 6, DJs were flipped out. Like, what are you doing? They're all using that. Remember the CDN 88, the dual CD players?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was like everywhere you looked, and people were having some issues or they weren't. But my approach was, if I'm going to do this on my own, I want the best gear I can possibly afford, because I think it elevated where you stood in the marketplace in your own mind. And I think that shows when you're dealing with clients.
I was looking for things that just worked, because when I was working for the multi-op, there was a checklist at the end of every night that you had to go through to make sure you had all the stuff. The first question on the checklist was, what's wrong?
Yeah.
And if you came back to the office that night with nothing written in there, you heard about it, because there's always something wrong. Something's always broken. What didn't you tell us about? What are you going to throw the next person under the bus with this broken stuff next week? Who takes out the system?
Right.
It was that bad. So when I started my own company, and maybe that's why I'm such a snob about this stuff, I just want it to work.
Yeah.
I that's why I can't do budget. I mean, maybe it's stigma. Maybe some of the budget stuff's fine, but in my mind, I've got to have quality because my livelihood depends on it.
Well, the guy making $100,000 a night in a club isn't using something as much for the name as he is because he can trust it. I mean, Tiesto's not using CDJs because there was no alternative at the time. He was using them because they did the purpose and job he needed, but he trusted they'd always work.
Yeah.
So I figured, well, if he can trust it, I can trust it.
Sure.
And that's kind of the logic that I've always used. The other benefit I've had is I worked on boats. If a DJ has a problem on a boat, that's a real issue. You're talking reporting to the Coast Guard or somebody that you need to board a vessel in the bay. It's not a simple, let me run down and hand you a mic. So I became very, very, very anal about gear and backup and torque screws and limiters with gates on them. I mean, guys were blowing speakers and it was no big deal. It wasn't their gear. Well, it was my gear.
Right.
So, I'm the same way you are, Brian. It had to work.
Yeah.
By the way, when I left in 2003, we were still using the 1998 2 Sony Discmans with a Radio Shack mixer.
Like the Radio Shack. Realistic, baby.
Oh, yeah. I lived on those things from...
But it was, right.
You know, like probably, I want to say 1984 to probably 1994. I mean, I lived on those things. Everybody had them because they wouldn't die.
No, but think back in the late 90s, we didn't have the buffering that we had in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. If you're on a boat that's constant, and I'm talking a boat that holds 40 people, and it's in constant movement, CD players were constantly skipping.
Yeah.
So the only thing I could come up with by going to Mobile Beat magazine and other people was, what's my solution? Like, what can I possibly... And they're like, well, you could always buy 2 Sony Discmans. They won't skip. You can take those running. They have buffering. And I'm like, that's what I'll do.
You want to hear something funny talking about old gear that works? I went back to the safe house for the first time in 25 years a couple weeks ago. And I started there, I started there in 92. So it was over 30 years after I first started working there. The lights were different. Obviously, the rack was different because I brought my own. The speakers were the same. They're running the same speakers, the same tops and the same subs. And I hate to admit it, but they sounded just fine.
What were they?
I have no idea. I bet you, I think I know what they are, but I'm not positive. I think they're RCF loaded Sonics. Because locally we used to make that.
Yeah, it would have been just down the road from them.
Yeah.
I worked at Club, my very first...
Literally down the road from me. On Highway 32, yeah.
They had Ramses. And I know when that club closed in 2012, they had the same Ramses.
Sure.
They had the gray plastic Ramses boxes hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah.
And then the subs under the stage. And they had them for, at least 16, 17 years.
John, did we totally go off topic on your question?
We kind of wrapped up the question and such. And
okay.
We got to wrap things up.
I want to make sure there wasn't a follow-up question because we got 2 minutes to hit it. We got to do this.
You know, I wanted to kind of talk about the early days of, what we did and how we started out. And today, even we've talked about this in different shows and different interviews, but I think the takeaway is today it is about networking. And that's where
it always was. It always the world, it always was.
But now today, Facebook ads, they're not working. Wedding shows in some markets can still work, but most markets, they don't work like they used to. Yellow Pages is a what?
Right. The what?
You're gonna have your Google ads shown to every other DJ in your market, and probably not any of your prospects. So they're just it's a world of networking with venues, with other wedding professionals, with other DJs. Don't be an ass. You go out there and you talk to people and be that person that can be helpful to them.
Dude, John just said ass.
And no, I didn't. I said,
I know.
What happened in the old days?
Yeah, remember the old days that he used to. Yeah,
God, the way of that in the old days.
Yeah, that was.
And this, I don't want this to sound the wrong way, but be good at what you do.
There is that too.
Yes, people, if they trust you in your product, they're going to recommend you. People are going to remember you. So do something unique. Do something different than the next person. Do it well.
Be a good DJ. There's a lot of not good DJs that are busy making a lot of money.
I know, but
because they're better at networking. They're better at, kissing babies and shaking hands. The thing you mentioned, John, and I have to mention it because I'm about to do it. Look at your last year. Send a letter out, an email or something. I'm doing that probably the beginning of February to all my clients from 2022. Big like, hey, wanted to touch base, see how things are going. Thank you again. By the way, I'm offering, $100 gift card to the store of your choice if you refer someone to me that's getting married and they decide to book me. And you'd be surprised. A lot of people that really enjoyed you have a very easy time selling you to one of their friends. Like, oh, that's so funny you bring that up. My cousin. I was telling Brian, I'm doing a wedding in 2024. I did her sister's wedding in 2018. And the email came to me the other day and she's like, we had such an amazing time. I want to see if you're available for my sister's wedding in March of 2024. I mean, that's a lot of people are living off their past clients for a very good reason, because those people already know you and they trust you. So don't overlook those people. Hit up your December clients from last year now and say, hey, I had a great time at your Acme company Christmas party. I know it's only January, but if you find a date for next December and you'd like my services before I'm all booked up, let me know and I'll be sure to hold a Saturday or a Friday for you. It was great working with you guys. You'd be amazed. Clients would be like, wow, let me knock that off my to-do list right now. Yeah. They may already know the date.
Yep. For some, they may jump on that.
I'm so happy that you came in tonight, John.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love working with you and I miss working with you. So.
Yeah.
Good to chat and good to hang.
It was a real throwback, kind of deja vu. I'm like, maybe
what's he doing here?
Yeah. I'm like, why is he here? Where's Hannah? What's going on?
And of course, our main, one of our main sponsors, DJ Event Planner, DJEP.com. You can go out there, DJEventPlanner.com. Check them out. They are one of the online planning tools you can use with your DJ company if you don't have that. And of course, our other sponsors, their links are going to be down in the description of this video. You can go check them out to show them some love and thank them for being part of sponsoring what we do here on DJNTV. Jay, Brian, once again, guys.
Great seeing you, John.
Thank you, sir.
Next time.